Jacob's Well appears to be paradise at first, bright, clear, and inviting. But beneath its beauty, it hides secrets that aren't easily seen by the eye. Footage from the underwater drone was filled with mystery and fear. What could it have seen that even experts can hardly explain? Katara, join me as we uncover the whole story. But before we start, maybe you could like this video. That would mean a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's begin. Jacob's Well appears to be a paradise at first. The water is clear and blue, and the area seems peaceful. It can be found in Texas Hill Country, near the town of Wimberley. Here, you will find a spring that seems like the perfect place to swim or cool off under the sun. But beneath the alluring body of water, there is a hidden danger that can't be seen by the eye. It's like a trap waiting for those who try to explore its depths. This is an artesian spring. Created by nature, the water flows from the fissures of limestone. From the entrance, the well has a vertical drop before entering a complex cave system. The passageways are winding, narrow, and sometimes suddenly widen. It is said to reach almost 90 meters underground. Meanwhile, over the years, many divers have been drawn to try the mysterious cave of Jacob's Well, but more than a dozen people have been recorded to have died here. Some were trapped in collapsing gravel, others ran out of air, and some got lost in the narrow passageways. Related to this, two teenagers with diving experience, Kent Milpin and Mark Brashear, entered the cave, but they never made it out. Their disappearance marked one of the first major tragedies at Jacob's Well. Rescuers tried to find them, but even they almost died in the process. Don Debo, one of those who tried to rescue, got trapped in the collapsing gravel and almost lost his life. Because the situation was extremely dangerous, he reached the point where he deliberately held his breath just to get out of being trapped. Aside from this, there's another story about a diver named Richard Patton, a 22-year-old student who went missing after taking the wrong route inside the cave. While trying to return, he was running out of air until he was ultimately unable to resurface. His body was found after a thorough search. The chambers beneath Jacob's Well have unique characteristics. In the first chamber, the water is still clear and there is enough light. But as you go deeper, especially in the third chamber, you can hardly see anything. The visibility decreases until it becomes completely dark. This is where the intense disorientation of the divers begins. The gravel at the bottom is always moving. If a diver gets derailed or makes a slight movement, the rocks and gravel can collapse. There have been incidents where it buried not only the equipment, but also the diver's body itself. It's like a trap that spares no one. Because of the repeated accidents and problems, the authorities of Hays County were forced to implement a ban on swimming and diving. It's not just the danger beneath that's the reason, but also the quality of the water. And in the month of June, it was closed due to drought. Since then, it has remained closed to the public. Experts said it's not safe to swim there. In addition, another major problem is the excessive use of water from the aquifer that supplies Jacob's Well. More water is being taken than it can replenish. This is causing the spring level to continue dropping. Because of this, the condition is getting worse and the attempt is becoming more dangerous. Because so many lives have been lost, experts thought that sending people down is not enough. So they used modern technology like an underwater drone. These drones are equipped with high-resolution cameras, sonar, and floodlights. It's safer to send them to places that people can't enter. In the first footage that was brought back, you can see the cave walls twisted like ribbons of limestone. The camera light hits the smooth rock and reveals crystal clear water. As it goes deeper, it gradually gets deeper. And as divers have experienced, darkness and danger are truly unavoidable. Related to this, as the drone sinks deeper into the cave, the light gradually turns into shadow. As it goes deeper, you can feel more and more that something isn't right. This is no longer a simple descent. It brings an unexplainable unease. When it reached the second part of the cave, that's when the signs started to appear. Some floating equipment was seen, like broken pieces of masks, ropes that were left behind, and some personal belongings that remained buried in the thick mud. All of those are reminders of the people who went in but never came out again. Each piece seems to have its own story of fear and tragedy. When we reached the third room, the surroundings became colder and darker. While the scientists and journalists were watching above, a glove suddenly appeared on camera. But that wasn't the only surprise. In an instant, something peeked out from the drone. It looked like a hand hanging there, motionless, but enough to make everyone watching stop. The question on everyone's mind, was it just imagination? Or is there a deeper explanation? As the experts watched the footage, the expressions on their faces changed. According to some divers who reviewed the footage, this is not just a camera illusion. For them, it's a warning. It's as if the cave itself is saying, "You shouldn't be here." What they felt then was no longer just simple fear. It was like a reminder that there are things better left unknown. But that wasn't where it all ended. In the same room, they noticed a piece of metal embedded in the gravel. Upon inspection, it turned out to be from old diving equipment, a model that hasn't been sold or used for a long time. That means it's been there a long time. And if that's true, it's likely that it came from a diver who has been missing for a long time and was never found. That discovery completely changed the course of their mission. From a simple experiment, it became a way to reopen the old case. They were no longer just observing the cave. What they found were traces of people who might have disappeared without anyone knowing. Related to this, in the first chambers, there were traces of people who passed through, such as pieces of their equipment and debris. But when they reached the third chamber, this is where more serious evidence began to surface. They found old equipment that wasn't just buried. It was pointing to a deeper part of the cave, as if something even more frightening was being hidden. After passing the third chamber, this is where they found the name of the place, what divers call the Cathedral of No Return. This isn't just a nickname. It has become a legend among those who dared to try. The entrance is narrow. Every breath can cause the gravel on the floor to move, so even a small mistake can be dangerous. Of all parts of Jacob's Well, this is the most dangerous and where the most people have died. Meanwhile, the drone kept descending into darkness. Held by Mike Garfield, a veteran operator with extensive experience, he is calm and knows what he's doing. He slowly adjusted the machine, and every second felt like exposing a darker secret. Suddenly, a glint appeared, a piece of metal clinging beneath the limestone. He stopped, zoomed in, and there appeared a diving mask. But it wasn't ordinary. Veteran divers immediately recognized the design. It hasn't been made in over 40 years. But there was a voice that whispered, "That's Kent Mopin's model." And that's where the course of the entire expedition began to change. This is no longer a simple investigation, it's now a recovery mission. Meanwhile, the drone continued to move forward. Its light clung to every fissure on the wall. They saw an oxygen tank already covered in rust. The label was almost erased but still intact. Next was a wetsuit's torn sleeve floating. And then came the terrifying sight, a whole body still wearing a wetsuit, wedged between two smooth rocks. The skeleton wasn't shattered, it was intact, as if the cave had trapped it. The arms and legs were twisted in strange positions, and it was as if Jacob's Well itself intended never to let the body go. At that moment, no one spoke, and then Mike spoke softly. "We've found him." On the wetsuit, there was still a name tag attached, almost coming off because of the long passage of time and being covered in mud. But when the light shone on it, the letters slowly appeared. Kent Mopin related to this two friends. Kent Mopin and his companion Mark Brazier decided to take on the challenge of the cave. While most were afraid to go down, they thought they could do it. But instead of success, their attempt led to one of the saddest tragedies in the history of Jacob's Well. Kent is not a beginner. He has many years of experience. He is fierce, brave, and seems to live just to explore every corner of Jacob's well. Meanwhile, Mark is younger and just starting out. He's a student, eager to learn, and looks up to Kent like an older brother. They arrived at Jacob's well with a group from Pasadena. The group camped near the area, and in everything they did, it was clear they were prepared for a tough challenge. When Ken and Mark put on their wetsuits and strapped the heavy steel tanks on their backs, they looked like warriors going into battle. But their enemy was not a person, but the cold, dark, and dangerous water of the cave. For Kent, entering the fourth chamber was a way to make history and reach a place no one else had ever been to. For Mark, it was enough to keep up with the person he admired. They descended together carrying the heavy tanks. There was no guideline back, no extra light, and no prepared plan in case something happened. The only thing they brought with them was self-confidence. They passed the third chamber and entered a narrow passage. It was in that dark passage where Kent and Mark were last seen alive by anyone. After 4 decades, Ken and Mark were still found there, buried and trapped inside the rock. Meanwhile, after the two disappeared in the fourth chamber, there was another diver in the area. His name was Joe. He was with the two during the dive, but he wasn't able to enter the chamber right away. He was left at the entrance, just enough to see what was happening. There, Joe witnessed the final moments of Kent and Mark. He saw them struggling to pull their heavy tanks through the passage. There was no safety line tied, no extra light to guide them, only their own courage and belief that they could make it back. Joe tried to return, drawing their attention. He took his knife and struck it several times against his tank to make a sound, but there was no response. He pointed his dive light at the passage, hoping the two would turn around and come back, but they didn't look back. It was as if something was pulling them that couldn't be explained, as if they were following a call that only they could hear. They continued to descend farther away. That's when Joe was forced to make the hardest decision a diver can make, to go back alone. Even though it was difficult for him, he knew that if he insisted on following, he might not make it back either. So he slowly backed away and started to ascend. When he reached the surface, the water behind him was no longer clear. Thick dirt and gravel had already spread out. That usually happens when rocks at the bottom are disturbed or if a diver panics. Whatever the reason, the meaning was clear to Joe. Something bad had happened in that passage. Deep down in his mind, Joe already knew that Kent and Mark would not be coming back. And since it was getting late, he called for an immediate rescue operation. 2 experts responded, Don Diebol and Paul Battaglia. Both were experienced, both were brave, but neither was truly prepared to go to Jacob's well. Don, a former Navy soldier who was used to the toughest dives, stood at the edge of the spring. He was used to tension and danger, but when he looked into that pit, he hesitated. He waited until the sun rose, hoping he would feel more comfortable and braver. The next day he went with Calvin Turner, a game warden and expert in such operations. They carefully placed the extra air tanks. For them, this was added security, a precaution. In case something unexpected happened, they also set up a safety line, made sure of every step, and followed all the proper procedures. But even so, their preparations still weren't enough. When the time came, Don put his head and shoulders into the narrow passage filled with gravel. That was the passage where Kent and Mark were last seen. Water rushed in and small stones hit his face. He checked the gauge on his tank. In his mind, he still had 10 minutes of reserve. But everything happened so fast, the gravel suddenly shifted. It fell like a trap. His arms were pinned and he could no longer move properly. His chest was struggling to breathe. The once clear water suddenly became murky. He could no longer see any light. He couldn't signal anymore either. It was as if he was being buried alive. As his air was running out faster, fear entered his mind. He slowly started thinking about death. How would it feel? How painful would it be? And should he just speed up the process? In desperation, he tried to swallow water. He did this several times, hoping that everything would end soon. But instead of death, something unexpected happened. His body suddenly convulsed. With that small movement, the gravel embedded in him loosened a bit. Light once again appeared in his vision. A shadow appeared in the dark, murky water. It was Calvin. He returned with an extra regulator and put it in Don's mouth. Because of this, his hope was revived. But the ordeal was not over yet. By the time he surfaced from the water, his stomach was swollen as if he was 9 months pregnant. The pain was almost unbearable for him. He was immediately rushed to Brooke Army Medical Center. There, he was placed in a recompression chamber, but it didn't help. He needed to be x-rayed, and that's when the doctor saw that his stomach had ruptured. The subsequent infection almost killed him. He fought for weeks in the hospital. There was almost no hope of survival, but he still survived. Despite everything, his recovery was slow, full of pain and danger. And while he was resting, the others did not stop searching for Kent and Mark. Even Jacob's well had already shown a clear warning. Even though it almost caused death, people still continued to dive and explore its depths. While Don Diebold was lying in the hospital bed, full of stitches and lucky to have survived, the fight was not over yet. Jacob's well claimed the lives of 2 young people, and not everyone is ready to accept that their story ends there. One of those who couldn't accept that idea was Don Broad. Broad was no beginner when it came to this kind of danger. He was 46 years old at the time, strong-willed, and grew up in the town of El Campo. For him, Jacob's well was not just a dangerous spring, it was a challenge that needed to be faced. While others backed away after witnessing the deaths caused by the cave, he stepped even closer. His goal was not just to understand the Kaya, but to face it in his own way. When he arrived at the place, he didn't hesitate. He immediately put on his gear and plunged into the clear but frightening water. He hurried to the path that led to the cave's 4th chamber. As he passed through, he noticed something terrifying. A small light was still flickering. It was left behind by one of the missing divers. That simple light served as a trace of their final moments. As he moved forward, he found a passage almost filled with gravel and rocks. For an ordinary person, this would just be a natural formation of the cave. But for Broad, what he saw was clear. These weren't just rocks, this was a burial site. He believed that under the heavy chunks of gravel lay the bodies of Kent and Mark. He couldn't get their last moments out of his mind. That image kept haunting him, the idea that they weren't trapped because of fear, but because they crossed the border. They went into a place that was extremely dangerous. And in Broad's mind, they shouldn't be left there. Instead of retreating, Broad thought there might still be a way. If the gravel could be removed from top to bottom, there might be a chance to get the bodies out. For him, it wasn't just about searching for remains, but about giving justice and returning their loved ones to their families. Meanwhile, 2 days later, a large flatbed truck arrived in the town of Wimberley, and on it was a huge machine that looked like it came from the future. It wasn't a spaceship like some people thought at first glance. It was a mobile recompression chamber sent by Schaefer Diving Company. The families of the victims themselves hired it. They didn't care about the cost. The only thing that mattered to them was to bring Kent and Mark back, no matter what the cost. At this point, the group was no longer just diving. It had become a large-scale operation. The divers and experts worked together, driven by the desire to complete the mission. It was no longer just about the history of Jacob's Well as a dangerous place. It had become a personal battle. A battle for families, for friends, and for people who are not willing to give up. In addition, Louis Schaefer was the first to go down to check the blocked passage. When he got to the bottom and saw that the passage was almost completely blocked, he immediately said the words, "God Almighty," on the radio. As a sign of extreme shock, that was the beginning of one of the most difficult rescue operations ever carried out at Jacob's Well. His fellow divers acted quickly. They placed a large hose and sucked the gravel from underneath. The small stones rise up with the water and are released into the stream. Meanwhile, the large pieces of stone are picked up by hand, placed in sacks, and pulled up one by one. The work is very heavy, tiring, and dangerous, but the hardest part of all seems to be fighting against the well itself. Every time they make a hole, the rocks and gravel fall back in again. It's like it's pulling in and closing the hole they've struggled to open. Despite this, they didn't stop. They kept fighting even as their bodies slowly grew tired and their strength was running out. The time came when the funds ran out. The equipment wasn't cheap, and it wasn't easy to pay the people who lifted and dived every day either. As the days went by, there was hardly any progress. Some of the volunteers stayed because they couldn't leave the place that had killed their comrades, until Senator Cadet Brooks himself intervened and brought in a new team from the Brown and Root Company. They examined the place, studied the situation, and after a careful assessment, they gave their conclusion. It's too dangerous to continue. That's why, 12 days after Kent and Mark went missing, the operation was finally stopped. The mission that started as a rescue ended in surrender. When the search was formally declared over, 2 lives were lost forever, and thousands of gravel were left underneath. This shows that Jacob's well prevailed once again. The well knows how to keep whatever it takes. Likewise, as an artesian spring powered by the Trinity Aquifer, it can shoot water straight up to a meter high. According to people back then, you could hear its roar even from the road. But everything changed. As more people used water for homes, businesses, and other purposes, the pressure dropped. The flow gradually weakened and nearly stopped. It was also recorded in history that there were times when Jacob's well did not flow. Each time more people asked, "Is this the end of the spring?" One of the reasons is the continuous pumping of water from the aquifer of companies like Aquatex, which is part of Essential Utilities. This is not illegal or secretive, it's just normal business. But the aquifer cannot keep up. That's why Hays County decided to take action. They bought some parcels of land around the well. Then a local group, the Wimberley Valley Watershed Association, added more land. They called it West Ridge Tract. They put up a fence, they put up wires, and they started plans for conservation. But the challenge is different underground. The Trinity Aquifer is like a living organism. If too much water is depleted, it will take many years or decades before it can recover. Some scientists even say that it might never fully return to its original state.